Hi, John Solari, the method actor speaks. And today, Joycelyn told me, watch this show on the E the other night. And I did, and I was very interested. And I noticed back we have Joycelyn, Lou, and we have Marilyn Fox, who the show is about. Michelle Fox.
Right.
But you look like a Marilyn too. I'm sorry. You had a lovely look. And I watched this show and I was thinking, wow, I know what it's like because I did interviews, and you sit there for a couple of hours, and you give your heart and soul out, and
Right.
then they come back and they edit it to like 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes if you're lucky.
Right.
And if you don't give them sex and lies and stuff like that, they want to cut it out.
That's true.
But it was, and you do ride a horse very good.
Thank you. We were there for 4 days.
4 days.
And we got a minute, I think.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So when I
She has quite a story.
when I looked at the show, I said, I asked Joycelyn to have, would you like to come and tell us what it was really about, and if you want to tell your side of the story. So I want to welcome you to the show. Please
Thank you.
feel free, and I don't edit the show, so whatever you say is going to be on there. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Just begin wherever you'd like to begin.
Okay, I was raised in a very, very strict religious family. My father was a preacher, and because my father was a preacher, the kids made fun of me at school. I was very, very introverted and very sensitive about that, and so I poured my heart and soul into animals, and especially horses. I loved horses, and I got my first pony, I think, when I was 8 years old. And I lived in the barn. I brushed them and fed them and rode them, and just, it was my life. And finally, it seemed like I really was in this very, very strict household that was all about rules and regulations. You couldn't dance, you couldn't drink coffee, you couldn't wear jewelry, you had to wear your hair a certain way and your skirts a certain length, and it was so constrictive that I never felt really loved, inside, and it kind of broke my heart as a child. I went into like a little dream world with my horses. Then finally, when I was 16, my dad brought this gorgeous man into my life. He actually brought him right into the ranch. It was kind of, I think, his way to hook me up with somebody that was good looking and successful. He was 22, I think, when I met him, and I was 16, and I'd never kissed a boy. I had never been touched in any way by a man. My dad kept me on a ranch with horses where I wouldn't even be around guys. I wasn't like the kids in school making out in the back of the theater. I was very serious. And this man was gorgeous. I mean, he was drop dead gorgeous. He looked like he walked right out of a movie set. And of course, at that time, I was living on a beautiful estate with a man-made lake, a mansion, waterfalls going into it, a riding stable, stream, and it was just gorgeous. And so he saw this little girl that was, alone and vulnerable, and he was an opportunist. So he wooed me, and he really made me feel like I was loved for the first time. We started getting affectionate when I was, I think, 17.
Yeah.
And it was the first time I'd known any kind of affection, so I just poured my whole heart and soul into this person, and I believed in love being a one-time thing, that you spend your whole life with one man, and my whole dream back then was to have a home and family and a little white picket fence. So things happened so that I was able to go to a girls' finishing school in Switzerland. And I actually had the opportunity to marry an aristocrat, a French count from France. And he fell in love with me, he courted me. His cousin was my roommate, Mathilde Coche de la Ferté, which I have really tried to find her. She was absolutely gorgeous. She was the perfect girl, long, full brown hair, perfect body, and she was treated with so much respect. She had like an entourage around her when she arrived at the school. We knew she was pretty famous. And she actually invited me to her home in Paris, and that's how I met Hervé. Well, Hervé courted me, and he took me to the Moulin Rouge, he took me to all the spots in Paris that you would never even know existed. But I had met this gorgeous man that looked like a movie star and had made me feel so loved, and I just, I just couldn't give my heart to him. So when I got back to Southern California, Redlands, this man showed up at my doorstep, and he was all back in the picture again, courting me and wooing me. And anyway, one thing led to another, and finally I just, Hervé called me from Paris. He flew all the way from Paris to see me, and at this point I was thinking, I'm not going to stay in a relationship unless it's going to go into something more permanent where I can have an actual home and family. I wasn't real happy at home with my family because it was just a lot of stress between my parents. So he got very upset when Hervé showed up, and Hervé told me, he says, don't worry, your honor will be saved. You can come to my house in Corsica, you'll never have to work. He really cared sincerely about me. And in the meantime, this other person just really went through the roof about this other man, and I guess he felt compelled to marry me. So I was 19 years old when we got married. It was a big wedding. It was 1,000 people there. We had an orchestra, we had a choir, we had 8 bridesmaids, 8 grooms, and it was really quite spectacular. It was written up in the paper. And here I thought, here I have the man of my dreams, and we'll be able to spend the rest of our lives together. And I was so shocked when the day after we got married, he totally changed. He was not affectionate anymore. He didn't come home at night. I would spend all day cooking because I had learned all these gourmet things at finishing school, and he wouldn't come home to eat it. It would be really cold when he got there. And they were having parties at his office that the spouses weren't invited to, and one night he came home and he was drunk out of his head, and he had a woman's pearl necklace around his neck. And I was shocked. I was not shocked. I was horrified, and I felt like I was losing everything in the whole world that meant anything to me.
Can I just stop you for a minute there? When you said everything changed after you got married, there was no signs or anything like that? I mean, no. I mean, don't women see things?
No, he was nurturing, he was supportive, he was funny, he was adoring. He was like the perfect boyfriend for 3 years. And then the day we got married, he just totally changed.
What do you think the reason was for that?
I think that, no more challenge.
I mean, no more challenge, I mean, that's kind of hard to know. That's hard
I really don't know. I don't know.
Really? I mean, because...
I don't know. I just know that he has been married 5 times.
5 times?
And he has 9 children with different women,
God.
and it just seems like he's really hot, and then he becomes cold, and I think that there's a deep-seated, he doesn't like women. I think that that's part of the problem.
When you say he doesn't like women, could you tell that?
He doesn't respect them. I don't know.
When you guys made love, you could tell that?
No, I couldn't tell that. But after we got married, everything came out.
So what do you think when you hear that? Can I ask Joyce, what do you think?
About,
What you just said about,
well,
I mean, do you
sometimes,
see, I mean, how do
I
you...
think when you're caught up on getting married and you've got the whole party going on and all the people, you're not even focusing on the relationship, and then maybe that's why you're going to miss it.
Yeah, because I think what the audience really like to know too is, get his story about how, this whole tragedy and everything. And it all began with your husband and then the horse?
Well, it was way more than that. But anyway, I think also part of the problem was that my parents were not getting along, and basically we lived on the ranch with where my parents lived. We lived in a little guest house.
So you're a cowgirl.
Well, I wrote English.
English? Oh,
different.
really?
Yes. I'm
Not
sorry.
Western.
I was so glad on the shoot that they had an English writing stable for me to write English on that horse.
Was yours too English on the I saw it.
Yes.
Both English?
And I'm
Now do you
used to
still-
Western.
She's used to Almorn.
Oh, so they weren't your horses?
No,
I was
they
wondering.
rented a stable for us because they knew I loved horses.
Where was the stable? Because my niece
Burbank.
has one in, I think, in
Gladwood.
Glendale.
What was that, Gladwood?
Chadwick, I think.
In Chadwick out there in, oh, okay.
Burbank.
I thought it was more Glendale.
Glendale, my niece,
I thought it was.
Amy Delisandro has a horse out there. I thought maybe you girls had horses. Did you say?
I had horses as a child,
Yeah.
but it had been years since, I actually have ridden since then, but,
You were really hurt by a horse, and now what did that feel like getting back on that horse?
oh, I've done it. I've been back on a horse many times after this accident.
Really? Well, can we like fast forward to the accident and what life has been like since then for you?
Well, let's just go back to my husband. I had gotten pregnant, and for 1 month I went away to visit a roommate that I had in Sweden. And during the month that I was away, my husband had an affair. And when I got back, I confronted him about it. He drugged me to see, that movie with where Dustin Hoffman had an affair with a mother.
Oh yeah, yeah.
The Graduate.
The Graduate.
He drugged me to see that. He thought that was the greatest movie in the world, and he had seen it a few times. And I just started knowing that he had cheated on me, and I was raised in this very idealistic place where you don't cheat. That's the end of the marriage, which probably is a good rule to go by because you lose trust. But I didn't find out till later. I was pregnant. I had gotten pregnant after 4 months of marriage, and I didn't find out till a little bit later. I was 4 or 5 months pregnant when a family relative told me that my husband had an affair with my mother. So that was quite shocking. But my mother had never.
How old was your mother?
40, I don't know, 38.
Oh, so your mother was.
My mother was
cougar.
very pretty.
Yeah.
She was very pretty. She was.
Most men dream of things like that.
I didn't know who it was. I knew he had cheated on me, and we had kind of come to it where we'd have to separate. But when I found that out, I tried to commit suicide.
What did your mother have to say to you?
My mother admitted it to me after 18 hours of labor, she came to the hospital after I'd had my child, and I confronted her, and she clung to me and she begged me to forgive her. She said it didn't mean anything. She was so lonely, but it did break up my marriage, and it was just kind of a pattern with her. My whole life, she was always about herself, her needs, and what she needed was more important than her daughters. So anyway.
So obviously your mother married young too.
Yes, she did. She was probably 20, 21. My dad was
So
19.
both of your lives is sort of similar,
And then my parents went through a terrible divorce. My husband, when I was pregnant and we were going through divorce proceedings, promised me faithfully. He said, "Don't worry, I will take care of you better if you don't go through the court system when my situation's better than it is." Well, he guaranteed me $100 a month. And the ironic thing about this, that's what he's, $125. I better be honest about everything. It was $125 a month and a baby with no other support whatsoever. And my father and mother were going through a divorce. My dad was losing everything, so he couldn't really help me. I had no education. And one thing led to another where I went to Las Vegas with I had found a babysitter, which was my grandmother, bless her heart, she was such a saint. And this lady, the only one that befriended me at this time, showed me how to make money at the blackjack tables. Well, I knew I would never be a prostitute, but I could just be at a blackjack table and flirt a little bit, and I was really beautiful when I was really very young. And so these high rollers would see me there.
I saw those photos on your website, and you were
Thank you.
Stop trafficking. You did
But anyway,
stop trafficking.
She taught me how to do that, and sometimes I would make really good money. I think just sitting at the table, I would never go up to their rooms. I did find out later that this is dangerous, but they would sponsor me. They would put money on where I was sitting so that I could gamble and stay there, and I would have to be vivacious and entertaining and look great. And sometimes I would go home with $1,500. I think one time I went home with $3,000. It was quite a bit of money.
So you were Lady Luck.
Yes, but I found out later women have been found dead
Well, but I'm saying
in the desert that did this kind of business.
Yeah.
You know, it's just not something, it's very dangerous. So I kind of knew I was, but I had a baby to support. I was alone. I didn't have any career. I had no idea what to do, how to earn money. So this was what was happening. And I had a cousin. She was beautiful. She had been Miss Nevada. Her husband was a professional gambler, and they took me in. They gave me a place to live. They knew about this very much. She used to, it's called steering the high rollers. So she told me about it, and
What year was this?
1971.
Oh, so it was still the boys there.
Yeah, it was really, I mean, I was very
wise guys still
successful
have
at it.
fun.
And I finally bought a beautiful little 240Z, my first car that I owned that was really nice. And I was so proud of that car. So I would go to Las Vegas for a few weeks, then I'd go back, and I would make that trip back and forth and make some money and then go back, because I had to eat, and I had to feed my child. I had to take care of our life, and we really didn't have a roof. I mean, I stayed at my grandmother's house, but anyway, in Las Vegas one night, I met with a very, very terrible experience. I was in a near-fatal accident there. A van pulled out right in front of me. It was completely her fault. She didn't see me, and it totaled both the cars. My car was completely totaled. Her car had flipped over. The engine dropped out of it, and there was 4 police officers that saw this and thought we were dead. Everybody, because of the impact of the accident.
Was anybody dead?
No. But as I was in shock. They wrapped me in sheets, and they didn't know if I was paralyzed, or thought I could be paralyzed because of the extent of the injuries. And they took me to the emergency. And in the emergency, I was left alone with a paramedic. And, it was pretty shocking. He molested me sexually. I felt very trapped, very degraded, and I was
the attendant?
Yes.
The paramedic.
The paramedic, so I'm saying. Molested you?
Yes.
And she couldn't move.
I
because she
couldn't
was
move.
paralyzed.
They thought I was paralyzed. I was in shock. But I saw him. He had a sickly sweet look on his face, and he was going on and on about how beautiful you are. And I was, just, anyway, I just felt degraded. My whole life has been kind of.
How did that wind up? Did you wind up?
No, because I didn't know anything. I was
So
a
he
child.
got away with it?
He got away with it. Okay, so that happened, and then I went back. I actually got into a little building in Van Nuys that my dad helped me get into, and that was very difficult too with my child, because tenants are very rough, and it was a rough area at that time. It was really bad, kind of a bad area.
Still is.
I had a tenant throw a board at me, and one day I came home and everything out of my place had been ransacked and stolen. So it was really a difficult time. And
Where's your daughter
did I
now?
tell you I tried to kill myself?
Yeah, a few times. But I mean,
Okay.
where's your daughter now?
My son?
You had a son.
I have a
You
grown-
didn't say.
I have a grown
You
son.
said you had a child, so.
I have a grown son that I tried to raise for 9 years. I raised him alone. When I was raising him, his father continued to. I had to beg for that $125 a month, by the way. It was really hard. But anyway, we got the next thing that happened was, I loved horses. I became very religious. Not very religious. I became very God-fearing. I realized, when you come into a near-fatal accident, there's a higher power out there that has something to do with your life. And so I was going to a church for years. I went to a church called Crenshaw Christian Center, a black church with Frederick K. Price, that really taught me the Bible and how to stand on the promises of God, which was, I believe it saved my life, because I couldn't continue to go to Las Vegas and chip hustle. That couldn't happen anymore, so I tried to make this little building work. In the meantime, a friend of my dad called me that had a horse, 2 horses, and he wanted to take me horseback riding. I was very excited about that. I had just come home from church, and after church we were going to go to Simi Valley or Solari. I believe it was Solari. He kept saying, well, there's one horse I can't let you ride because he was an ex-racehorse and he's too wild. But the other horse you can ride. And I actually did ride the other horse, but he was having problems with his horse. And the horse that he was having problems with, he wanted me to hold the bridle. And so I got off the horse I was riding, tied it up, and then I went to step forward and just to take the reins from the horse. In the meantime, the horse reared up and struck me and the right side of the face, completely fracturing the whole right side of my face. I lay in a pool of blood. They thought I was dead, and my front teeth were knocked out, and the whole right side of my face basically gone. In the meantime, fortunately, the man had insurance. We were able to do some reconstructive surgery, but it, and I did go through, and on the TV show it says about 10, I don't know, it was probably 4 or 5 procedures to try to reconstruct this cheekbone, which it still hasn't worked out quite right, but it's been like my lifelong quest to restore my face the way that it was before all this happened to me. And I found some wonderful people that have tried to help me with it. In the meantime, now my parents were divorced, my father had lost all his money, my husband had left me alone with a baby, and I was disfigured. I'd lost the one thing that I had any confidence in, which was my beauty. I was really beautiful. Men were just knocking my door down. They were taking me out to breakfast, to lunch, to dinner. I mean, they were vying for my attention, and I really felt, and managers. I wanted to be a model and an actress. I was being approached all the time to go to beauty contests and to do modeling jobs, and that's what I wanted to do. Except my real dream was to be a wife and a mother and have that white picket fence. But if I couldn't do that, that was the kind of work I wanted to do, and then also to be an actress.
Well, before you answer that, because we're just about out of time, I want to come back and do part 2 in a minute, where we can find out about that and what it was like for you and Joycelyn when you went into the studios and what went on there, the conversations of what, and how you two met. And she's been very supportive of you.
Yes, she has.
So we want to come back with part 2 in a minute here. And so hang in there, folks.